The evening bus had long departed when Ethan Miller realized he wouldn't make it to pick up his daughter from after-school care before the late fees started accumulating. Fees he couldn't afford this month. Rain poured relentlessly, flooding the gutters along Jefferson Avenue. His phone battery had died during his double shift at the hospital where he worked as an orderly. Desperation pushed him to do something he'd never done before, approach a woman in a parked car, water streaming down his face, to ask for help. He never imagined this single moment of vulnerability would change everything. The woman rolled down her window just enough to hear him over the drumming rain. Her face, partially illuminated by the soft glow of her dashboard, revealed cautious eyes studying him. "I'm sorry to bother you," Ethan said, the words tumbling out between labored breaths. "My phone's dead and I need to get to Oak Ridge Elementary before they charge me late fees for my daughter." He gestured to his soaked hospital uniform. "I work here. I wouldn't normally." The woman's expression softened slightly. She glanced at the hospital ID badge clipped to his shirt, then at the relentless downpour. "Get in," she said finally, unlocking the doors with a gentle click. "I'll take you." Ethan Miller hadn't always been the kind of man who needed to count pennies and work double shifts. 3 years ago, he had been a construction foreman with a pregnant wife and a 5-year-old daughter, planning to build them a house with his own hands. Then came the complications during childbirth, the emergency that took both his wife and newborn son in the span of 12 terrible hours. The medical bills that followed, combined with time off work to care for Lily, had collapsed their financial security like a house of cards. Now, at 38, Ethan worked as a hospital orderly, moving patients, cleaning rooms, and doing whatever was needed with the same meticulous care he once brought to constructing buildings. He had chosen the hospital deliberately, harboring quiet dreams of someday training as a nurse, though the practical demands of raising Lily alone had put those aspirations on indefinite hold. The woman driving the car was Dr. Eleanor Hayes, recently appointed head of neurosurgery at Memorial Hospital at 36 years old. Few people knew that behind her professional accomplishments lay a personal life as empty as her immaculate penthouse apartment. 5 years earlier, her husband had decided that loving a woman whose career demanded such complete devotion was beyond his capacity. The divorce had coincided with the most crucial phase of her residency, and Eleanor had channeled her pain into professional excellence, becoming known for surgical precision that bordered on artistry. What neither of them knew, as the expensive car navigated rain-slicked streets toward Oak Ridge Elementary, was how thoroughly their carefully constructed, separate lives were about to intertwine. Lily Miller was the last child waiting at after-school care, sitting alone in a corner with a book open on her lap. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she didn't immediately look up when the door opened, but as soon as she heard her father's voice, she launched herself across the room and into his arms. "I'm sorry I'm late, sweetheart," Ethan said, kneeling to her level despite his soaked clothes. "It's okay, Dad, I got to finish my chapter." She held up a book about the solar system, her enthusiasm undampened by the weight. Eleanor watched this reunion from just inside the doorway, struck by the intensity of love in this simple exchange. As Ethan signed his daughter out, apologizing to the staff for his lateness, she noticed how Lily tucked herself against her father's side, how her small hand naturally found his, how their movements synchronized without conscious thought. The rain hadn't let up. "I can drive you home," Eleanor offered, surprising herself. Ethan hesitated, his instinct to refuse warring with practicality. "That's very kind, but we've imposed enough. It's pouring. Please. I insist." In the car, Ethan sat in the back beside Lily rather than in the passenger seat, a detail that didn't escape Eleanor's notice. He gave directions to a modest apartment complex in a working-class neighborhood, his voice careful and measured. When they arrived, he thanked her with formal politeness, shielding Lily from the rain with his own body as they hurried inside. Eleanor watched until they disappeared, then sat in her idling car, wondering why she felt reluctant to drive away. A week passed before their paths crossed again. Eleanor was leaving the hospital after a 14-hour surgery, the satisfaction of saving a life balanced against bone-deep exhaustion. Lost in thought, she nearly collided with a cleaning cart in the hallway. "Sorry, doctor," said a familiar voice. Ethan stood before her in the blue-gray uniform of the maintenance staff, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You're the woman who drove us home, and you're the man from the rain," Eleanor replied, a small smile softening her professional demeanor. "I didn't realize you worked here." "For almost 2 years now," he gestured to the gleaming floor he'd just finished mopping. "Night shift pays better. My neighbor watches Lily when I work evenings." "Your daughter loves astronomy," Eleanor said, remembering the book. Surprise flickered across Ethan's face. "She wants to be an astronaut, doctor? Her term, not mine." "Ambitious. She gets that from her mother." Something closed in his expression as he said it. They might have parted then, returning to their separate orbits, if not for the sudden thunder of a hospital announcement. "Code Blue Pediatric ICU. Code Blue Pediatric ICU." Eleanor's body tensed automatically, though it wasn't her department. Ethan's hands tightened around his mop handle, knuckles whitening. "Does it ever get easier?" he asked quietly. Hearing that, "No," she answered honestly. "It doesn't." She reached into her bag and withdrew a business card, offering it without fully understanding why. "In case of emergencies," she said, "my direct line." Ethan hesitated before accepting, clearly uncomfortable with the gesture but unwilling to refuse. He tucked the card into his pocket with careful fingers, nodded once, and returned to his work. Eleanor continued to her car, where she sat for 20 minutes before driving home, as was her custom. The habit had begun after particularly difficult surgeries, a buffer between professional intensity and personal emptiness. Tonight, though, she found herself thinking not about the surgery she'd completed, but about the man methodically cleaning floors in the quiet hospital corridors. The emergency came sooner than either expected. 2 weeks later, Ethan's phone rang while he was helping move patients from a wing undergoing renovation. The school nurse informed him that Lily had developed a high fever and needed to be picked up immediately. Stuck in the middle of a time-sensitive patient transfer, Ethan felt panic rising in his throat. With shaking hands, he pulled Eleanor's card from his wallet. He expected to reach a secretary, to leave a message that might be addressed hours later. Instead, Eleanor herself answered on the second ring. "Dr. Hayes, this is Ethan Miller, from the hospital. You gave me your card." "I remember. What's wrong?" When he explained the situation, her response was immediate. "I can pick her up. Text me the school details and any medication information." At the school, Eleanor's professional authority smoothed the administrative process. Finding Lily curled in the nurse's office, flushed and miserable, she introduced herself gently. "I'm Dr. Hayes. Your dad asked me to come get you because he's helping patients. Is that okay?" Lily nodded weakly, too ill to be suspicious of this stranger. Eleanor brought the child to Memorial, where she could monitor her condition while Ethan finished his shift. They were in the staff break room when Ethan found them, Lily drowsy on the couch, while Eleanor read aloud from a medical journal, translating complex terminology into an improvised story about cells fighting invaders. The relief on Ethan's face when he saw his daughter being cared for transformed his features entirely. For the first time, Eleanor saw beyond his careful composure to the depth of feeling he usually kept concealed. "It's likely just a virus," she explained, switching seamlessly to professional mode. "But she needs rest and fluids. I've written a prescription for something to bring down the fever." "Thank you," Ethan said, the words inadequate for the weight of gratitude behind them. I don't know how to repay." "No repayment necessary," Eleanor interrupted. "I'm glad I could help." She drove them home again, but this time Ethan invited her in while he settled Lily. Their apartment was small but meticulously maintained. Every surface gleamed, every item had its place. What struck Eleanor most was how Ethan had transformed a basic one-bedroom apartment into a home. Lily's space, separated from the main room by a colorful curtain, featured hand-painted stars on the ceiling. Bookshelves made from repurposed crates contained neatly arranged books, mostly from the library. A stuffed bear with a worn ribbon sat on the carefully made bed. "You've made this lovely," Eleanor said as Ethan emerged from checking on Lily. "We make do." His tone was neither proud nor apologetic. "Can I make you some tea? It's the least I can offer." Over mugs of tea, they sat in awkward silence until Ethan spoke. "Why did you help us? Most doctors don't even notice the maintenance staff." Eleanor considered the question. "I notice more than people think," she said finally. "And maybe I needed to be useful outside an operating room." 3 days later, Eleanor delivered a small stack of children's books to their apartment. "Educational material," she explained when Ethan opened the door, "about the human body. I thought Lily might enjoy them since she wants to be an astronaut doctor." Lily, recovered from her fever, peeked around her father with shy curiosity. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Ethan asked, the invitation surprising them both. "It's nothing fancy, just spaghetti." "I'd like that very much." Eleanor watched, fascinated, as Ethan transformed simple ingredients into something special. He didn't just cook pasta, he arranged the modest meal as if they were dining in a fine restaurant, garnishing with herbs grown on the windowsill, folding paper napkins into simple but elegant shapes. "Dad makes everything pretty," Lily confided as she helped set the table. "He says just because we don't have much doesn't mean we can't have nice things." During dinner, Lily peppered Eleanor with questions about being a doctor. Eleanor answered each one thoughtfully, treating the child's curiosity with respect. She noticed how Ethan listened with complete attention, absorbing information alongside his daughter. As they washed dishes together afterward, Eleanor insisting, despite Ethan's protests, she realized she felt more at ease in this tiny kitchen than in her spacious designer apartment. The weeks that followed brought a gradual shift in all their lives. When Lily needed help with a science project about the brain, Ethan encouraged her to ask Eleanor. This led to a Saturday afternoon spent at their apartment, Eleanor explaining neuroscience concepts, while Lily created a model from clay and cardboard. Ethan observed from the kitchen, moved by Eleanor's patience and the way she never spoke down to his daughter. For lunch, he prepared sandwiches cut into brain shapes, serving them on their best plates, with a flourish that made both Lily and Eleanor laugh. The sound of Eleanor's laughter, unguarded and genuine, caught him off guard. At the hospital, she moved with composed precision. Here, helping his daughter attach a clay hippocampus, she revealed glimpses of a different woman entirely. After Lily went to play with a neighborhood friend, Ethan and Eleanor had their first real conversation about their lives. "Why neurosurgery?" he asked, as they sat with fresh cups of tea. Eleanor traced the rim of her mug. "I like fixing things others consider too complicated or delicate to touch." She looked up. "Why did you choose the hospital after construction?" "After my wife died during childbirth, I wanted to understand the system better," Ethan admitted. "I had this idea I might become a nurse someday, but reality had other plans." "It's not too late," Eleanor said quietly, "for nursing school." Ethan's smile held gentle resignation. "Some dreams get put on hold when you're a single parent." "Not canceled, though, just delayed." Their Sunday morning ritual began by accident. Eleanor dropped off more books and found them preparing for their weekly trip to Westside Park. On impulse, she asked if she could join them. Soon, she was a regular part of their tradition. Simple breakfast on a park bench, followed by what Lily called treasure hunting, collecting interesting leaves, rocks, and other natural objects. On their third Sunday together, Eleanor spotted a medical textbook in Ethan's bag. He explained, somewhat embarrassed, that he still studied when time permitted. Without hesitation, she offered to lend him better resources, to share insights about nursing programs that might accommodate his schedule. Something shifted between them that day, an acknowledgement that what had begun as chance encounters had evolved into something they both valued. They walked home in comfortable silence, no longer strangers but not yet able to name what they were becoming. The hospital's annual fundraising gala arrived in early spring. Eleanor, who usually attended alone and left early, impulsively invited Ethan and Lily as her guests. "It's for the children's wing," she explained. "There will be activities for Lily, and good food," she added, knowing Ethan's appreciation for culinary experiences. Ethan hesitated, aware of the social gulf between them. "I don't have anything appropriate to wear to something like that." "Just a jacket and tie is fine," Eleanor assured him. "It's not as formal as you might think." That wasn't entirely true, but Eleanor wanted them there enough to downplay the event's elegance. She arranged for a colleague's daughter to lend Lily a dress, framing it as a reward for the girl's excellent science project, rather than charity. The evening began well. Lily was enchanted by the decorations and activities in the children's area. Ethan, in a borrowed suit that fit him surprisingly well, maintained his dignity despite clearly feeling out of place. Eleanor, navigating between her professional obligations and her guests, felt an unfamiliar warmth at introducing them to her world. Then came the complications. First, Eleanor's colleagues noticed her attention to the orderly, as they referred to Ethan when they thought she couldn't hear. Then her ex-husband appeared, now dating a prominent hospital board member. The encounter was brief but loaded with tension. "Expanding your community outreach, Ellie," he murmured, eyeing Ethan across the room. "Always the dedicated humanitarian." Eleanor's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Before she could respond, the hospital director pulled her away to meet an important donor. When she finally extricated herself, Ethan and Lily were nowhere to be found. She discovered from the coat check that they had left. Ethan's text, received an hour later, was polite but distant. "Lily was tired. Thank you for including us. Sorry we had to leave early." In the days that followed, Ethan began avoiding Eleanor at the hospital. He switched to morning shifts, didn't answer her calls, and returned books via Lily's backpack with brief thank you notes. When Lily asked about Eleanor, he made vague excuses about Dr. Hayes being very busy. Eleanor left medical journals and notes that went unacknowledged. She reverted to her previous patterns: extra surgeries, late nights at the hospital, meals alone in her apartment overlooking the city. But now the solitude felt heavier than before. A chance encounter in the hospital cafeteria finally brought them face to face. Ethan was finishing lunch before his shift. Eleanor was grabbing coffee between consultations. She approached his table, determined to clear the air. "May I join you?" Ethan nodded stiffly. "I've missed our Sundays," she said simply. "Lily has too." His voice was careful, neutral. "But you haven't," Eleanor challenged gently. Ethan set down his fork. "Look, I appreciate everything you've done for us, but I don't want to be anyone's project or good deed." "Is that what you think you are to me? I heard your ex-husband. I saw how everyone looked at us at the gala, the charity case and the brilliant surgeon." His jaw tightened. "We've managed on our own for 3 years. We don't need pity." Eleanor felt her professional mask slipping. "Is that what you think I feel for you? Pity?" "I don't know what you feel," Ethan said quietly, "but I know what it's like to be seen as less than what you are, and I won't let Lily grow up feeling that way." He stood, collecting his tray. "Thank you for everything, Dr. Hayes. Truly. But it's better if we go back to our own worlds." Eleanor watched him walk away, unable to find words to bridge the chasm between them. She had faced down terrified families before, high-risk surgeries, delivered both devastating news and miraculous outcomes, but in this moment, her eloquence failed her completely. 2 weeks later, Eleanor overheard nurses discussing Ethan's background. His wife had died at Memorial before Eleanor joined the staff. There had been a settlement, kept quiet by the administration. A young mother lost due to a misdiagnosis, a preventable tragedy. Suddenly, his distrust made perfect sense. His choice to work at the hospital, despite the painful associations, his protective nature with Lily, his hesitation to accept help from a doctor. Eleanor considered reaching out again, but respected his clearly drawn boundaries. Instead, she threw herself into work with renewed intensity, volunteering for the most difficult cases, staying later each night. If they passed in the hallways, Ethan nodded politely, but kept moving. Eleanor noticed the shadows under his eyes, the tightness in his shoulders, but said nothing. Both were too proud and wounded to bridge the gap that had opened between them. The accident happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Ethan was helping move a heavy imaging machine when a support brace failed. He managed to push another worker clear, but couldn't avoid the falling equipment himself. The impact left him with a broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, and a concussion. Eleanor was consulting in the emergency department when they brought him in. Without hesitation, she took over his case, despite his groggy protests. "Please, someone else," he mumbled. "Be quiet and let me work," she replied, her voice firm but gentle as she assessed his injuries. Lily arrived from school an hour later, her face white with fear. Eleanor intercepted her before she could see her father connected to monitors and IV lines. "Your dad is going to be fine," she assured the child, kneeling to her level. "He has a broken arm and some bruised ribs, and his head got bumped, so he's a little confused right now, but nothing that won't heal." "Promise?" Lily whispered. "Doctor's honor," Eleanor said, holding out her pinky finger. Lily linked her own tiny pinky with Eleanor's, completing the solemn vow. Later, as Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, the pain medication loosening his carefully maintained control, he spoke words he might never have said otherwise. "I push everyone away," he murmured, eyes closed. "Can't lose anyone else. Can't let Lily lose anyone else." Eleanor sat beside his bed, monitoring his vital signs. "No one's going anywhere, Ethan." "You were," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "You were becoming important, dangerous." "Why dangerous?" "Because she loves you. I might." His words faded as he drifted back to sleep. Eleanor stayed well past her shift, ensuring Lily was cared for, arranging for Ethan's neighbor to take the child home. As she reviewed his medical records, she discovered the full story of his wife's death: a misread test result, symptoms dismissed, an emergency that came too late. The case had been settled quietly, the hospital admitting no wrongdoing, while providing financial compensation that had quickly been consumed by medical bills and funeral costs. When Ethan was stable and more alert the following day, Eleanor made a difficult decision. She visited him during her lunch break, closing the door to ensure privacy. "I know about your wife," she said without preamble. "I know what happened here. At Memorial." Ethan's face hardened. "You had no right to look into that. I had every right as your doctor to understand your medical history and concerns." Eleanor pulled a chair closer to his bed. "What happened to her was unforgivable. A failure of the system I'm part of." "Is this supposed to make me feel better?" "No, nothing can make that better." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "But I need you to understand something. When I spend time with you and Lily, it's not out of pity or charity or some professional obligation. It's because you both matter to me." She hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Do you know why I sit in my car after shifts? Because I don't want to go home to an empty apartment. Do you know why I volunteer for extra surgeries? Because saving lives is the only thing that makes me feel worthwhile outside the operating room." She leaned forward. "Until I met you and Lily, I was surviving, not living. You don't need me, you've made that abundantly clear. But maybe I need you. Both of you." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "I don't know how to trust this," he finally said. "Any of it." "I know," Eleanor replied. "But maybe we could try, one day at a time." They might have continued this tentative reconciliation, if not for the phone call Eleanor received 3 days later. Lily had developed a high fever at school, similar to her previous illness, but more severe. Ethan, still hospitalized, was frantic with worry. "I'll get her," Eleanor said immediately. "I'll bring her to you." At the school, Eleanor found Lily burning with fever, her normally bright eyes glassy and unfocused. Using her professional authority, she had the child transported directly to Memorial's pediatric ward. Ethan, against medical advice, insisted on being brought to his daughter's room in a wheelchair. He watched, heart pounding, as Eleanor worked alongside the pediatric team to stabilize Lily's condition. "Viral infection," the pediatrician confirmed after examining test results. "We'll need to monitor her closely." Through the night, Eleanor stayed with them both, checking Lily's vital signs, adjusting medications, keeping Ethan calm. In the quiet hours before dawn, with Lily finally sleeping peacefully, Ethan spoke. "The night Rachel died," he said, his voice low, "I begged someone to listen. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it. But I was just the anxious husband, and they were the experts." Eleanor listened without interrupting. "After, I promised myself I'd never be that helpless again. I'd never trust anyone else with what matters most." He looked at his sleeping daughter. "But tonight, watching you with her, I realized something. I trust you, Eleanor. I didn't want to, but I do. Eleanor moved her chair closer to his. When my husband left, she said quietly, he told me I cared more about my patients than real relationships, that I was emotionally unavailable. I believed him. I decided that professional success would be enough. She reached for Ethan's hand, resting it carefully beside his cast. It wasn't enough, not even close. In the pale light of monitors and the first hint of dawn through hospital blinds, they sat together in silence, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. 3 months later, Ethan began a part-time nursing program. Eleanor had helped arrange a scholarship and flexible schedule that allowed him to continue working while studying. She regularly helped Lily with homework and science questions, becoming a steady presence in their lives. They hadn't defined their relationship, but they spent most evenings together, creating a new rhythm that encompassed all three of them. Eleanor had cut back on extra shifts, discovering that limited time made her work more focused rather than less effective. Ethan was learning to accept help, to trust again. Lily bloomed with the additional support, excelling in school and talking constantly about becoming a neurosurgeon astronaut. Their Sunday park ritual continued, now including Eleanor naturally. She no longer sat in her car after shifts, instead driving directly to their apartment, where dinner and conversation awaited. As the anniversary of Rachel's death approached, Eleanor offered Ethan space, understanding the day would be difficult. To her surprise, he asked her to join them in their memorial ritual. Rachel would want Lily to be surrounded by people who care about her, he explained. That includes you now. At the cemetery, Eleanor waited respectfully at a distance, while father and daughter placed flowers on the grave. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan motioned for her to join them. "Mom, this is Dr. Eleanor," Lily said to the headstone, her voice solemn but not sad. "She's teaching me about brains and stars, and she makes Dad smile again." Ethan knelt beside his daughter. "We're learning to be happy again, Rach," he said softly. "I think you'd approve." Eleanor shared a simple memory of her own mother who had passed away during her residency. How she had taught Eleanor to find beauty in small moments. The three of them stood together, connected in grief and healing, understanding that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. In late summer, Eleanor received a job offer from a prestigious hospital across the country. Better position, more money, professional advancement. She considered it seriously, torn between career ambitions and newfound connection. She didn't tell Ethan immediately, not wanting to pressure him, but Lily discovered the offer letter while helping Eleanor organize research papers. "Are you moving away?" the child asked directly, her eyes wide with concern. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Eleanor had the conversation they'd been avoiding. "You should take it," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. "It's an incredible opportunity." "On paper, yes," Eleanor agreed, "but what about everything else?" "I would never hold you back," Ethan said firmly, "after everything you've done for us." "This isn't about obligation," Eleanor interrupted. "This is about choice. For the first time in years, I'm thinking beyond my career. That's because of you. Both of you." They agreed to take time, to make no hasty decisions. Both carried too many scars to rush into declarations that might not withstand reality. 2 weeks later, Eleanor invited them to dinner at her apartment, something she had never done before. Her penthouse, with its panoramic city views and designer furniture, had always been her private sanctuary. Lily was enchanted by the floor-to-ceiling windows and the stars visible from the balcony. After dinner, she fell asleep on Eleanor's pristine couch, clutching her beloved stuffed bear. Ethan and Eleanor stood on the balcony, the city lights spread before them like earthbound stars. "Your home is beautiful," Ethan said. "It's just a place," Eleanor replied. "It's never been a home, not really." She turned to face him. "I declined the job offer." Ethan's expression registered surprise, then concern. "Because of us." "Eleanor, I don't want you to sacrifice." "I'm not sacrificing anything," she interrupted gently. "I'm choosing. There's a difference." She explained her decision to accept a teaching position at Memorial instead, working with medical students and residents. "I'll still perform surgery, but I'll be passing on knowledge too, creating something that lasts beyond the operating room. You sure? Ethan asked. I have never been more certain of anything. She hesitated, then added, I don't need the prestige anymore. I need this. What we're building together. Ethan reached for her hand, his work-roughened fingers gentle against her surgical ones. Thank you, he said simply, for seeing me. Really seeing me, when no one else did. Thank you, she echoed, for teaching me that success isn't measured in professional achievements. No dramatic declarations passed between them, just quiet acknowledgement of what they'd found together. 1 year later, Ethan arrived home from his clinical rotation in nursing scrubs, tired but satisfied. He found Eleanor and Lily at the kitchen table of their modest but comfortable house, heads bent over an advanced science experiment. Books and papers were spread across the surface, Eleanor pointing to diagrams, while Lily took careful notes. They had chosen this home together, midway between the hospital and Lily's school. Eleanor had sold her penthouse without regret, discovering that she preferred the sound of family to the silence of perfect views. Dad's home, Lily announced, jumping up to show him their project. Eleanor's teaching me about electrical impulses in the brain. It's so cool. Ethan hung his backpack on a hook by the door, noting the mingled evidence of their lives throughout the house. Medical textbooks beside children's stories, Eleanor's precise handwriting next to Lily's improving cursive on the calendar, his nursing texts stacked alongside Eleanor's research journals. In Lily's room, professional astronomy charts now accompanied the hand-painted stars on her ceiling. The beloved stuffed bear sat proudly on a shelf of growing academic achievements. As they prepared dinner together, moving around the kitchen and practiced harmony, Ethan realized how completely their separate lives had intertwined. Eleanor, setting plates on the table, caught his gaze and smiled. The unguarded smile that had once been so rare but now appeared regularly. Later, as they reached for the same serving spoon, their hands touched briefly, his work-roughened fingers against her surgical ones. In that simple contact was a world of understanding. That healing happens in the smallest moments of connection, that strength can be found in vulnerability, and that love grows most surely in the quiet spaces between words. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. Not the